Authorities warning they could reach as high as 5 metres in height in the coming hours. The governments in North and South Korea have issued similar advice. A country from Japan's meteorological agency says more earthquakes are expected.
A major tsunami warning is in effect in Noto, Ishikawa Prefecture. People near the shoreline and riverbanks, please evacuate to higher ground. Please be cautious of further earthquakes up to Shindo 7, the highest rating on the Japanese seismic scale, for the next week, and in particular, for the next 2 to 3 days. This is the first major tsunami alert since the earthquake that occurred in the Pacific Ocean on March the 11th, 2011.
With that as we go through the afternoon here on GB News. Now, the number of channel crossings in 2023 has fallen by more than a third compared with last year. The last crossings of last year took place on the 16th of December, when 55 people made the journey from France in one boat. Bad weather conditions have prevented further attempts. The provisional annual total for the year is more than 29,000. British forces are prepared to respond to cargo ship attacks by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says the UK will not hesitate to take direct action to protect the key shipping route. The Iran-backed Houthis have targeted merchant ships recently, citing support for Hamas in its war with Israel. The US Navy recently said it sank 3 rebel boats that had targeted a container ship in the region. Average household energy bills will now be almost £100 more expensive. The energy regulator has increased its price cap by 5% from today in response to rising wholesale prices. Households are urged to submit meter readings as quickly as possible to ensure they're charged correctly. Ofgem says it's made it clear suppliers must identify and help those struggling with their bills. New restriction on visa routes come into force today as the government attempts to tackle net migration. Now only foreign students on postgraduate or government-sponsored courses can bring their families over. The Home Secretary, James Cleverly, says the new ban will prevent people from manipulating the system and will reduce migration by tens of thousands. Critics say, though, it will hit universities, which rely on foreign student fees, and could also harm the UK's reputation internationally. Eye tests may be required for drivers over the age of 70. The Automobile Association's calling for mandatory screening after the number of licence-holding drivers over the age of 90 doubled in the last decade. A record 153,000 Britons in that age group hold a full driving licence with no requirements for additional qualification or screenings. The AA wants drivers to be required to show evidence of eye tests once they reach 70 to improve road safety. We are live for you across the UK on TV, on digital radio. If you want us on your smart speaker, just say play GB News. That's it for the moment from me.
Right, well, new year, same problems. The NHS faces the longest national strike in its history this week, when junior doctors walk out for 6 days from 7 a.m. this Wednesday. Now, health bosses have warned that the strike action will likely sink Rishi Sunak's waiting list pledge. That's the pledge to eliminate waits of longer than 65 weeks for operations and other procedures by March. So joining me now from Westminster is GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, thank you very much for joining me. Happy New Year to you. Very stark warnings coming from NHS leaders that areas, basic services within the NHS are skating on thin ice.
Well, absolutely. This is set to be the longest strike in NHS history. Junior doctors are set to walk out for 144 consecutive hours, and it ties in with the busiest week traditionally in the NHS's calendar. We've got huge bouts of seasonal flu, obviously, and there's plenty of NHS staff off work anyway with COVID. So it's basically a perfect storm for the NHS. The chief of the NHS Confederation, Matthew Taylor, has urged for the strike to be cancelled and has said that if it can't be cancelled, then the BMA must trust senior doctors when they say that they need junior doctors to be called off strike, and they must allow those junior doctors to go into work if they are called into work. There is an agreement in place that if there is an emergency, doctors will be called back into work. But the very fact that Matthew Taylor is even having to tell the BMA that senior doctors should be trusted on this is a pretty bad sign for the levels of trust now between the chiefs of the NHS and the BMA, the biggest NHS union. The problem, of course, is that this is set to continue. The next 7 days are going to be very, very bad for the NHS. As Matthew Taylor has said, the NHS will be skating on thin ice. But there is no end to this in sight. Junior doctors are asking for a 35% pay rise. The government says that is simply impossible. They've offered an 8% pay rise. Now, that gulf is just enormous, and how on earth it's ever going to be breached is still a bit of a mystery. At the moment, 1.2 million appointments have been cancelled since December 2022, when these strikes first started. 86,000 appointments were pushed back from the 4 days of strikes last month. That just gives you an idea of the scale of the problem. The idea that Rishi Sunak is going to meet his pledge to cut waiting lists is for the birds at this point. If anything, waiting lists are just going to get longer and longer, with no sign of a breakthrough in sight between the government and those doctors' unions.
Yes, because Olivia, we seem to have heard from both the BMA, from the union leaders, and from Victoria Atkins, the Health Secretary, that they all want to negotiate. They all want to get round the table, but yet it doesn't seem to happen, and we have not seen any results.
Well, absolutely. They say they want to get round the table. There hasn't been an actual sit-down meeting between the Health Secretary and the BMA in recent weeks. Perhaps there will be one in the coming months, perhaps after this strike. Perhaps that will participate some sort of meeting. But what difference really is that going to make? They can negotiate, but if you're negotiating from a position where you're trying to breach the gulf between 8% and 35%, it's very, very hard to see how any kind of agreement can be made. Last year, of course, we saw the government agree all sorts of deals with various public sector workers. A deal was reached with nurses, for example. But the difference is that the gulf was just much, much smaller. Nurses were calling for a rise just a few percentage points above what the government was offering. So there was a lot of room for agreement. This time round, it's very, very hard to see what can happen. Doctors are saying that a rise of 35% would only put them back on the same pay as they were getting in real terms in 2008. They say that inflation and years of pay freezes has meant that they're actually much, much worse off than they were almost 20 years ago now. So how that is going to work out is a mystery. And while we wait, it's patients at home who are going to be bearing the brunt of this.
Yes, the junior doctors do seem to be the most intransigent when it comes to pay demands out of all public sector workers, it seems. And just to reiterate, really, NHS, the state of the NHS is one of the top 3 issues among voters, nearly always. I believe it is now the second most important after the cost of living. This is a huge problem for the Conservative government.
Yeah, this is an absolutely huge problem, and actually, arguably, this is one of the Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges where he's most obviously, most blatantly failing. He can say that although the economy isn't exactly growing right now, the OBR have forecast that by the latter half of this decade it will be growing. He can say that there is progress on stopping the boats, although the Rwanda legislation isn't yet through Parliament. Actually, boat crossings did go down by 30% last year, but he cannot argue that NHS waiting lists are going down. They simply aren't going down. A couple of months ago, they reached a record high of 7.7 million. And obviously, demand is well back to where it was before the pandemic. We are just going into the first real months of the winter crisis period for the NHS. And at the same time, we are facing the longest doctor walkout in the NHS's 75-year history. So it seems more and more unlikely that Rishi Sunak will make any progress at all on his pledge to cut NHS waiting lists. And as you say, that is going to be very, very important for the country, and the country will judge him on it.
And besides the real-life consequences on patients and their families, those who are languishing on these waiting lists, of course, it makes it much more difficult for Rishi Sunak to make his pledge when it comes to growing the economy too. Many people out of work due to long-term sickness as well. Thank you very much for your time, Olivia Utley, GB News political correspondent. Now, in other news, Japan's tsunami warning has been downgraded to less serious after having earlier issued a major tsunami warning after a series of strong earthquakes. Buildings have collapsed, tens of thousands of homes are without power, and locals are being advised to stay alert to any changes and follow instructions issued by authorities. I'm now joined by meteorologist John Hammond. John, can you tell us the latest, please?
Well, the latest is that, the worst of the tsunami threat hopefully will be receding over the next, 3 or 4 days as earthquake activity begins to die down. But over the next 2 or 3 days, as you've mentioned, tsunami warnings are at their highest level. So obviously the authorities are all over this, and people will be paying attention to those warnings and taking the necessary action. But obviously for large swathes of Japan, the next 2 or 3 days are especially critical, given the amount of earthquake activity that has been taking place over the last couple of days. Seismologists are pretty good at this. They have a feel for whether that earthquake activity is going to lessen or to intensify, and the consensus is that it is going to lessen. So I'm hopeful that towards the end of this week, the tsunami warnings will begin to lessen from that top level which we're at the moment, and people can get back to their normal way of life in Japan. But as I say, the next 2 or 3 days are especially critical.
So tentatively, some good news coming out of Japan. Now, of course, there is a constant threat of earthquakes in Japan, isn't there? They're one of the most seismically active places in the entire world. That means they have one of the most sophisticated warning systems.
They really do. I mean, thankfully, across the UK, we have nothing like that. We get the odd tremor occasionally, which makes the headlines, but that's absolutely tiny compared to the huge tectonic forces which take place across easternmost parts of Asia. It's part of the Ring of Fire. It's known as the Ring of Fire, which encircles the Western Pacific. And, it's very hard to sort of predict at longer ranges when these tsunamis, these earthquakes are going to flare up. But certainly once these seismologists can see the whites of the eyes and start to get the seismic activity through on their meters, they then have a pretty good feel for how long that sort of peak in activity is going to last. You can see the footage at the moment of what's been going on over the last day or so. But there is confidence that if we can get through the next 2 or 3 days, then things will begin to die down. But we're in an active phase of seismic activity across this area of Japan at the moment. So they'll be very wary for further flare-ups later on in January. But fingers crossed, the worst will be over come the end of this week.
And John, the Japanese authorities were telling the Japanese living in coastal areas to evacuate immediately. They were saying every minute counts. Will those people still be evacuating, as you understand, or will there be some staying put now?
I think the large majority of the coastal population will be evacuating. Obviously, there will be emergency responders who will stay in place to deal with the very most acute of the conditions around the coast. But for most people, most members of the public, they are well versed in these sorts of evacuations. So I think that'll be taking place apace as we speak. So that although we can't stop a tsunami, these sorts of seismic forces are unstoppable. Most people will be getting out of harm's way over the next few hours.
Yes, because there was, of course, massive fears that this could replicate previous earthquakes followed by tsunamis that we've seen in Japan.
Yeah, the skill, though, is much, much better. It's improved immensely over the last few years in terms of the response to these sorts of events. As I say, you can't control tsunamis, you can't control earthquakes, but what you can do is ensure that people get out of harm's way. So I think the death toll from recent tsunamis has been far less than it was a generation ago because of the ability to respond and evade the worst of those tsunamis along the coastal fringe. So yes, the vast majority of people will be getting out of harm's way over the next few days.
Well, thank you very much for your time, John Hammond, meteorologist, and a very happy new year to you as well. Right, well, let's go live now to Ross Feingold, who is in Taiwan. Ross, thank you very much for joining me. So how seriously is this being treated in East Asia?
Very seriously. People are as your previous guest mentioned, people who live along this so-called Ring of Fire, they're well aware of earthquake risk as well as tsunami risk. But also to follow on what your previous guest said, the level of awareness and training as far as what to do in the aftermath of an earthquake, it does vary from country to country. Frankly, I'm speaking from Taiwan, where they're not as well trained or prepared as Japan. And then the Philippines, which also suffers from earthquakes, they're probably not as well prepared or well trained as Taiwan is. But Japan is very, very good at this. The earthquake drills that even young students get in public school, and the training that the safety authorities get, whether that's in the nuclear industry or the fire and rescue services, Japan is very, very good at this. And that's why we see the near immediate word from the authorities that people should evacuate to higher ground, get away from the coast, because the tsunami risk is very, very high in the aftermath of such a large earthquake.
Ross, so that's very interesting that children from a very young age are taught what to do when a warning goes out and what to do if you're taken unawares.
Sure, and I think we saw a little bit of that in some of the video footage you had of people shopping in supermarkets, and they're very quick to realize that this is an earthquake. You know, they don't take 10 seconds to figure out what's going on. They know right away that this is an earthquake, and they know what to do: get low to the ground, or ideally get into a doorway so that things don't fall on top of your head. But again, these images do illustrate how well trained people in Japan are.
Yes, and it's amazing to think that there have been 50 earthquakes in such a short period of time in one country alone. Also, we've seen warnings of large waves in other countries, so South Korea, also Russia, also North Korea. Do those still hold, do you know?
As far as I know, those still hold at the moment, just keeping in mind that the Sea of Japan, which separates Japan from the mainland Asia, from China, South Korea, North Korea, it's a relatively closed area, so that the waves could bounce back and forth, although it's subject to other factors such as weather and the depths of the sea. But certainly the waves could travel to one side or the other. And that's also why the tsunami warning is expected to last several days in Japan.
Yes, and there was a huge international concern that this could have, and hopefully will not, as it stands, replicate previous earthquakes followed by tsunamis that we've seen in the region.
That's right. So most famously, there was the 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan, and of course the Boxing Day earthquake and tsunami in Southeast Asia in 2004, both of which caused an enormous amount of destruction and unfortunately an enormous amount of loss of life. And for the 2011 earthquake in Japan, it also caused the meltdown at the Fukushima nuclear plant. So there's been a lot of questions about the safety of Japan's nuclear facilities in the aftermath of today's earthquake. But up to now, the regulatory authorities in Japan, they've emphasized that the nuclear facilities have not had any impact.
OK, thank you very much indeed for your time, Ross Feingold, who is in Taiwan, and a very happy new year to you as well. Now, after the break, we'll be discussing the growing popularity of dry January. Is it something that you would do? Is it something that you're currently doing? Let me know.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back. It's 12:24 and a very happy new year to you if you're just joining us. Now, these are live pictures we're going to from central London where New Year's Day celebrations are taking place. Look, that's what appears to be a marching band coming through central London. Cheerleaders, women in leotards, what more could you want? Lots of celebrations there. It looks like it's absolutely packed out. Let me know how you're celebrating New Year's Day, if you are, or perhaps you were celebrating quite a bit last night. Although, speaking to people, it seems like a lot of people chose a cosy night in to celebrate the new year. But there you go, there's central London. Lots of crowds of people celebrating the new year, 2024. Marching band, look at that. Well, some people today might not be in the best shape to celebrate. There's nothing like a New Year's Day hangover to make you reassess your drinking habits. This year, almost 9 million people in the UK are planning to take a whole month off the drinking in January. So here to give some of the benefits of binning the booze, some tips to stick with it, is the founder of Sober Clear, Leon Sylvester. Thank you very much, Leon. Lots of people will be waking up this morning with a bit of a hangover, thinking, how could I start yet another year feeling absolutely rubbish? So tell me, what are the benefits of just giving up the booze altogether?
Well, just quickly before we get into those benefits, I just want to say that it is so surreal to be here. Literally 5.5 years ago, I was at ground zero. I'd destroyed my life through drinking alcohol. For the 100th time, I was broke. I was minus £2,000 in my bank account, in the overdraft. Working in a restaurant, I'd destroyed my business. And man, it's just crazy. It's just crazy how quickly life can turn around.
So alcohol was basically destroying your life and destroying your aspirations, your motivation. Were you really down in the dumps?
For sure, I drank for almost 10 years, and it was just like this complete roller coaster. I tried to stop drinking on my own, 100 times, right? I tried read stop drinking books. I tried going to AA meetings. I'd I'd even gone to church and I begged God to help me. I dropped to my knees. And it was the one thing in my life that I knew that if I could solve that problem, the life of my dreams was going to become a possibility.
Mm.
And 5.5 years ago, it happened. And I think Dry January, it's a great topic of conversation right now because this can be the catalyst for so many people that are thinking of making this change. And
Leon, what happened? If you were drinking for 10 years, everything was going a bit wrong, you knew that quitting drinking would change your life. How did you actually do it? What actually made you do it? If it wasn't AA, if it wasn't other people?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, these things, don't get me wrong, I'm not here to criticize any other program out there. These things are all great. But the thing that I knew I needed to change was the way I viewed alcohol. My problem was that I always saw alcohol as something that added value in my life. I saw it as something that created so many benefits and so many good things. So every single time that I try and stop drinking, it was like I was missing something. And when I finally shifted that perspective to see alcohol for what it is, if we boil it down to its core, all it is a drug. It's a highly addictive, poisonous drug that really provides nothing for anybody. As soon as I saw it that way, it was like this flick of a switch. I was just like, that is it, I'm done. I really hope that anybody that's thinking of doing Dry January, this interview, what I would love to happen is they get to the end of January and they think back to this interview and they're like, that was the reason that got me all the way to the end of January. Because one thing that I can promise you is only good things happen as a result of not drinking. And if you go all of January and you get to the end of January and you're just like, that was the only good things happened. I mean, I just know for so many people, when they stop drinking alcohol, the life of their dreams becomes possible.
Well, because for a lot of people, it's a huge part of their social life and how they cope with everyday stresses, isn't it? So how do you see quitting drinking, even if it's just for January, as gaining something rather than losing something? Because a lot of people, they see their friends, they drink when they see their friends, they drink when they see their family, they drink after work with their colleagues. It's often how they bond with people. How do you see giving up alcohol as something positive to your life rather than making it, well, more boring?
Well, the reason why people see alcohol as something that adds value in their life, it lies in how we've been conditioned to see the drug. At the end of the day, we're born into a world that promotes this thing as something that enhances our life, right? We turn the TV on, and what do we see? We see somebody saying that wine drinkers live longer, right? Then we would turn the movie on, and then our favorite characters there relaxing with the drink. Then we've got these celebrities, these athletes, these people that are making hundreds of millions by promoting this drug. When you really boil it down to its core, what is alcohol, right? It's ethanol. It's something that does nothing for you. And it's like, once you see it that way, all the conditioning, all the way that we've been told to see alcohol just kind of disappears, right? So then you only get benefits. You don't get a single negative through removing alcohol from your life. Nothing bad ever happens. Don't get me wrong. There are people out there that do need medical help, right? There are people out there that stopping drinking, it can be dangerous, right?
Dangerous,
And
yeah.
I'm not here to downplay that. And if that's you, then you might need to get medical help. But man, kickstarting your sober life with a Dry January, it's going to be awesome.
Well, you know what, Leon? My family WhatsApp group this morning, all of my family are apparently embarking on Dry January, so we'll see how that goes. I think for a lot of people who don't want to quit alcohol altogether, limiting it to social occasions is probably a good idea, so you don't get stuck in a rut of, drinking alone, because it's a depressive, after all, isn't it? A depressant. But thank you very much for your time, Leon Sylvester. I really appreciate it. And I see you're in Thailand. Well, I hope the weather's rather lovely. Lovely to speak to you, Leon Sylvester, founder of Sober Clear. Are you going to be embarking on Dry January? I mean, it probably is a good idea. I do like a drink every now and again. But let me know if that's what you're going to be doing. gbviews@gbnews.com. But coming up, 16-year-old Luke Littler continues his historic run in the World Darts Championships. We'll be live from Ali Pali as he gears up for his quarter-final. But first, the news headlines with Aaron.
It's just after 12:30. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Emergency services in Japan are responding to reports of at least 30 collapsed buildings and multiple fires after a major earthquake. A 7.6 magnitude quake hit the Noto region in the centre of the country at approximately 7 a.m. UK time. No casualties have been reported yet, but a government spokesperson believes people are trapped under the rubble.
As of today, at 6 p.m. local time, there have been numerous calls to the emergency services, and we have confirmed several incidents of collapsed homes following the earlier earthquake. We will continue to make all efforts to gather information in order to identify all injured persons. The specific details are currently unclear, but we have received reports of 6 individuals trapped by collapsed buildings in Ishikawa Prefecture. We do not have information on whether these injuries are related to the tsunami, but the details are currently being confirmed.
And the number of channel crossings in 2023 has fallen by more than a third compared with last year. The final crossings took place on the 16th of December, when 55 people made the journey from France in one boat. Bad weather conditions have prevented any further attempts. The provisional annual total for the year is more than 29,000. British forces are prepared to respond to cargo ship attacks by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says the UK will not hesitate to take direct action to protect the key shipping route. The Iran-backed Houthis have targeted merchant ships, hijacking some, citing support for Hamas in its war with Israel. The US Navy recently said it sank 3 rebel boats that had been targeting a container ship in the region. We'll have a full bulletin at the top of the next hour, or there's more right now on our website, gbnews.com.
"2024, a battleground year."
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 12:37. Now, before the break, we heard from Leon Sylvester, who's, turned his life around since he ditched the booze. Lots of you have written in, actually. Many of you also had a bit of a problem with the old drink and have quit, been sober. Steve says he's been sober for 30 years. He said he started at the age of around 10 years. Wow. So he was drinking for 30 years, then quit, and his life has very much improved. Derek Stevens says, Paul says, I consider myself the luckiest person on earth. I used to have a really bad drink problem. And again, he's turned his life around. So lots of positive stories. Others of you have actually said, you know, stop nagging. I'll have a drink if I want one. So there you go. Two very different views there. But let me know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, in other news, it is a huge day in the world of darts. 16-year-old Luke Littler is gearing up to face Northern Ireland's Brendan Dolan in the last 8 at the PDC World Darts Championships. So after storming past 5-time world champion Raymond van Barneveld to reach the quarter-finals, can fans sense further victory in the air? So let's dart over to Alexandra Palace and speak to our reporter Theo Giacomo. Theo, a big match ahead.
Huge, to say the least. Loads of fans have already arrived here. 3.2 people are going to be here today. A majority of them we've spoken to will certainly be cheering Luke Littler on. 16 years old. He was saying in his story in the last couple of days, when he was just 18 months and he was hearing music of some of his idols like Phil Taylor, also known as Phil the Power Taylor, and Raymond van Barneveld, who's also beaten to get to this stage. And today he will be taking on Brendan Dolan from Northern Ireland as part of the game today, which I believe started at 12:30, so just a few moments ago. So over 3,000 people are here to cheer him on. But interestingly though, it's the outfits which make it really interesting today. We've seen people wearing priest outfits, wearing dartboards as part of their clothes, and some other costumes which you can't really mention during the day. It's more for evening time. But certainly the mood here is extremely high. Everyone's been looking forward to it today. A lot of those people, as you've just been speaking about New Year celebrations, they were out yesterday and have made it here today. We spoke to one gentleman and his partner just a few moments ago, just arrived. She surprised him. She bought him tickets and he said he shed a tear knowing that he was coming to watch Luke Littler today. So hugely exciting day for everyone who's come here today to watch him, and their fingers crossed that he'll win today.
Yes, thank you very much. Theo Giacomo there outside Ali Pali, Alexandra Palace in North London. I must admit, I would love to see Luke Littler storm to victory and take the World Championships. Thank you very much indeed. Now, it's time now to speak to my panel. Joining me to talk through some of the biggest stories of the day is former Labour MP Stephen Pound and the Conservative commentator Benedict Spence.
Did you really say dart over to the Alexandra Palace?
I did, yes, and it wasn't in my autocue, of course.
We're never going to be bored when you're arrowing in on them like that, are we?
Well, do you like the darts, Stephen?
Oh, darts?
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely amazing. I do like, obviously, everybody plays a bit of pub darts, but what's extraordinary about darts nowadays, people go there dressed up as polar bears and leprechauns and creatures from outer space. It's an incredible occasion. The Dutch, for some reason, I think of as sober Lutheran people, playing total football and, maybe sipping the odd Kuipers, whatever it is they drink. But they take, look at Raymond van Barneveld, we talked about, world champion. But they turn up there, and it's amazing. Everybody's in fancy, just all waving these 180 signs. The darts is almost incidental. You're a bit of an arrows man, aren't you?
It's quite a unique sporting event, isn't it?
It is.
I'm not entirely sure it's sport.
it's sport of a sort. I think it's just a sort of very joyful occasion. And the thing is, you can get behind almost anybody who's doing it, no matter what their character is, no matter if they actually look like a sports person. And I've been trying to remember the quote of which darts player it was who said he considered himself an athlete because he got to go on grandstand or something like that. I can't remember which one it is. See, I remembered Raymond van Barneveld. Yeah, anyway.
Well, talking of things, moving on to something a little less joyful, we started the show with the junior doctors' strikes. Stephen, another 6 days, 144 consecutive hours of strikes starting on Wednesday morning. How do we come to a resolution?
Look, we can't go on like this.
No.
We simply can't. Look, we're at the worst time of the year, the worst possible time. There's a certain cruelty, there's a certain viciousness, a certain nastiness about people who take the strike action at this particular time of the year. Now, the problem is, you know and I know, that huge numbers of people would end up in hospital, and there's a novavirus outbreak at the moment. Look, the idea is that a 35% pay rise, which basically goes back God knows how long and brings everybody up to the same level, is simply not on. Inflation is falling. So you've got to actually realise that. The other thing is, if you're a junior doctor, you're on a very, very good career progression, a very, very good career path. You're going to end up, you're not going to be starving by any means. So I think maybe...
Also, it's not a mystery what you're going to be paid.
No.
When you sign up for the job. But Benedict, I guess it's tricky though, isn't it? Because the junior doctors, of course, they continue to say that they're underpaid. But why do you think that they are more intransigent than other groups of public sector workers?
I think because they feel and they know that they can get away with it because we come to rely on the health service quite so much. You know, they are essential workers, and it's not something that the government can turn around and go to war with like they are train drivers or
more essential than teachers or nurses. Nurses have agreed to their pay offer.
Absolutely, because a nurse can't do what a doctor can do.
Pat Cullen has just now said, because of the inflation supporting, they're going to put in another pay claim for the nurses. But I think what you're saying is that they're doing it because they can do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's very worrying. What does that speak to the psychology of the people?
The problem is, because we've lionised the NHS and we've sort of deified it for a long time, and we think of it as entirely sort of a morally good thing, and I think that's to misunderstand why it is that people become doctors. They don't do it because they want to necessarily save people's lives. They do it because they recognise it's a well-paid, well-respected profession. It's academically very stimulating. It's respectable. You know, you go to university and you're sort of stood next to your flatmates. They're not, sort of these wonderful sort of angelic figures. They're just people like you who want to go out and make a living, and they recognise that being a doctor is a very good way of doing that. Now, when you're living in a globalised market where it is easier for very sort of highly skilled people to be plucked from different countries, as we've tried to use to our benefit, when countries like Australia and Canada are offering you better terms, and people can see that because their fellow
They're actively trying to poach.
Well, they're actively trying to poach their fellow Anglosphere countries, so it's not a secret what's going on. You can understand why they'd sit there and go, well, hang on, why am I putting up with something that isn't as good as I could get elsewhere? It makes perfect sense in a marketised economy.
So what should the government be doing then to deal with the more militant tendencies of some of these unions?
Well, I think these are separate issues. Each union is a different issue. I mean, the RMT, there's the other train drivers unions we can talk about, but on this particular...
Well, we heard from the TUC leader the other day, him saying that he'll do everything he can with regards to these new Labour regulations on the minimum service levels, etc., to help anyone who wants to strike.
Well,
the battle is...
I think presumably that's you pay the piper, you call the tune, and I think that's what he's saying there. Look, the reality is that if you actually have a look at the present situation in industrial relations in this country, a lot of it is based on a lack of communication. Victoria Atkins, the present Health Secretary, is a lot more conciliatory and a lot more emollient than I think Steve Barclay was before her. So, I mean, she's actually signalled a willingness to talk, but she's also said, look, in all honesty, 35% is simply untenable. So it's got to be, Churchill, George...
But, I mean, I've heard from the BMA that they have said that they would, accept a plan to get to 35%.
I mean, but would they accept the plan that was put to them? Would it be a good enough plan? But I think the key thing is, we're sort of looking at this through the prism of the current government. Within the next 12 months, there's probably going to be a different government. Actually, what is the Labour Party saying that it's going to do to alleviate this? Because I don't believe that it will get solved under the Tories, either because of political sort of intransigence or because the money simply isn't there. But what would the Labour Party do differently? Would the doctors still stay on strike under a Labour government?
That's a very
interesting... has been sort of very vociferous in saying the money isn't there for all of the things we want to do. So I think that's a
very interesting question, because that will reveal whether the BMA are pushing this strike action for larger political goals than just pay rises for their members. But shall we move on? Because Kemi Badenoch has been making news once again today, because she's topped, at least by grassroots Tories, to be the next leader. Stephen?
Well, what's interesting, I'm a passionate reader of Conservative Home. I mean, I very
are you now?
Oh, absolutely. I knew Paul Goodman very well indeed, who was the editor of it. He was an MP we were at the same time. He's also a seminarian, I think, a good man. And this survey is actually about 671 people. And the most interesting factor to me is the write-in candidate, because there's somebody who actually got 18 votes who's not even a Tory MP. His name was... Farage. Nigel Farage. And so,
yes, but out of the ones that can be the next Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch came out top.
She did indeed, and guess who? Then you get Suella Braverman, coming down the line. So, I mean, I think she's made a good pitch, and she certainly, as the Tory party. I mean, I think Richard Tice talked about the smoking ruins of the Conservative Party this morning, and I think when the smoking ruins are finally extinguished and the new building has to be constructed.
The smoking ruins, is that hyperbole?
Well,
Benedict?
I'm quoting Richard Tice.
I think Kemi Badenoch would make a good candidate to be leader in the aftermath of a Conservative Party defeat. I don't think that she has the name recognition amongst Tory members. Fine, yes, they love her, but we had that issue with Liz Truss where everybody thought, oh yes, this will be a fantastic idea, and everybody on the outside was saying it absolutely won't be. But again, you see people like Suella Braverman, polling quite well. Suella Braverman is unelectable. This I'm afraid is a problem that the Conservatives have, which is if only we would just shunt everything over to the right, absolutely everything, then the public would just fall into line, which is rather similar to the Corbynistas, who said, if only we just shunt everything to the left, then they'll see sense. You do need a sort of a modicum of balance. I think Kemi Badenoch is a better candidate, therefore, than some of the others. I just don't think she has the recognition yet. I think she would need the time to be installed as leader and to build up that. So not much in the same way as Keir Starmer has, well, I wouldn't say transmitted his personality, but she needs that little bit of time grounding. Certainly, if we're talking about getting rid of Sunak now in the short term, absolutely not. It would be a disaster.
And is she better? Who's number 3 in the list? And that's the interesting one. The next person up is Penny Mordaunt.
Yeah.
I think Penny Mordaunt is... No, come on. I
don't understand this fascination with Penny Mordaunt.
Well,
what she said, other than that trans women are women, oh, wait, no, that's not what I meant, and then she held a sword. I mean, come on.
Fight, and fight. Look, fight. Outside. No.
She's got strong biceps.
Yeah.
That's what you want from a... To be fair, historically speaking, that is what you wanted from a leader, but...
I mean, I think she reaches out beyond the Conservative Party. I think she's very, very impressive.
I think she looks impressive. I don't think she's a very impressive speaker.
She also made one of the rudest speeches they've ever had in that. You know her famous cock speech?
No, go on.
Well, she's in the Navy.
Yes.
She's Wavy Navy. She's RMVR. And she was bet by a group of midshipmen that she couldn't make a speech mentioning cock, 25 times. So she had a German debate, and we saw on the conditions of British poultry farming, Penny Mordaunt, and she did absolutely straight-faced. And it was, I have to say...
She has delivered some great statements in the chamber.
It was an abuse of parliamentary time. May I say, I dissociate myself from this...
She has had some great retorts to the SNP.
But that's not difficult. Come on.
Not difficult, but it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting, Kemi Badenoch, because according to the survey and the reports surrounding it, 2 years ago she was ranked 11th in the Conservative home polling. So she really has had a dramatic turn in fortunes there. But do you think she's more known now, Benedict, for her trans issues than she is for what she's been doing as business sec?
Which is not necessarily a bad thing, seeing as this is sort of creeping into the mainstream a lot more, and I think a lot of people are waking up to what that actually entails, and she takes, I think, what most people would consider a fairly rational, sensible approach. So that's a good thing to make herself known about. Somebody needs to make themselves known for what they stand for on this issue, because actually it's rather difficult very often to get MPs to pin them down on this because they don't want to be attacked. That's not enough, obviously. We will need to see more. I think she was rather measured when it came to the bonfire of EU regulations, when she sort of faced down a lot of Eurosceptic Tory MPs and said, actually, no, we're not going to get rid of everything. We are going to go through and see what's worth keeping. But that's not really the sort of thing that brings you to sort of public attention. And again, that's why I say she doesn't have the cut through yet. I think once the public sees more of her, they may be inclined to think, actually, this is somebody who has got their head screwed on right, is rather sensible. But equally, is she perhaps not optimistic enough? Does she not try to sell stuff to people? Because often people want to hear very good things. They want to hear pie in the sky thinking, not somebody who tells you things as they are. And I suspect that's probably more who Kemi Badenoch is, a realist.
She didn't sell the World Trade agreements that she made very well, did she?
No.
And I thought, to be honest, she's working up with fairly poor materials. We're talking about our deal with Ecuador and Vietnam and everything like that. But she could have done more about that. And she could have done better. I mean, I take it. I think maybe she's keeping her powder dry. I don't know.
Yeah, I think certainly we're at the start of her political career. She's not sort of rushed into things too quickly, unlike Rishi Sunak, who I think has flown rather close to the sun rather quickly and got burnt. So I think
William Hague, who...
Having watched and reported on our political leaders' Christmas messages, followed by their New Year's messages, I think we might be in need of a bit of charisma. Wouldn't go amiss.
But should we
move on to another story?
You call it Riz.
This is one that Riz. This is one. Oh no, I don't think. I think I'm too old for that now, Stephen. But Stephen, this is a story that caught your eye. Actually, this is the Albanian crime boss who has unbelievably been allowed to stay in the UK after of course, claiming deportation breaches his human rights.
I'm sorry, sometimes my blood boils. I mean, I appreciate that we're at the season of goodwill and we should be looking forward to a glorious panoply of the New Year's. Everybody got great resolutions. But I have to say, I am furious about this. Even the Albanian ministry is furious about this. This chap comes across here as an illegal immigrant, marries a person with a British passport, gets his British citizenship, dumps her, marries an Albanian woman, has 2 children, then he launders, what, £8 million worth of money?
Yeah.
Money laundering, drug money. And so obviously he should be put in the boot of a car and driven straight back to Tirana.
Yeah, so he was jailed for 6 years for smuggling £8 million of his gang's profits out of the UK in suitcases that he brought onto planes using his British passport.
And I mean, never mind the poor woman who married first door, never mind the 2 kids, but for some reason, his family life trumps the safety and the security of this country. This country's safety has to come first.
Now, Benedict, is this an issue in our judiciary or is it our law? Because yesterday we were reporting on a Sudanese ISIS fanatic being allowed to stay in this country. The judges ruled in his favour, again, because going back to Sudan would breach his human rights.
I think a lot of it is down to interpretation. That's certainly a problem. But there's nothing... interpretation can be solved by changing the law, ultimately. I think that would be faster than trying to change the makeup of the judiciary, which actually takes a very long time. I think... that's ultimately what it boils down to. But in the case of an Albanian, it's always very amusing when a case of an Albanian, usually a drug smuggler or a people smuggler, turns up, because they are exceptional, these gangs, at playing the laws of different European countries. You sort of go across and be it Germany, be it Italy, be it wherever. They are very firmly embedded. They're very smart at this sort of thing. And part of the problem with this is, of course, Albania doesn't necessarily want these people back. We need to remember that, because this is something that is being exported. Money is coming back into the country, OK, illicitly. But these are criminals who once upon a time caused great damage to Albania itself, but now they are out in the rest of the world. It's not necessarily in Albania's interest to say, even if they do admit, yes, this person should come back, to actually facilitate that.
I just think a lot of people listening to this will be thinking, is it actually impossible to deport criminals?
It's not impossible.
In this country. It feels as though it is sometimes. We're going to have to leave it there, because coming up is Veganuary, a health choice this new year, or is it just nuts?
God.
See you very soon.
Get me a sausage roll, someone.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, Happy New Year. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. The last few months of 2023 were rather wet, and the start of 2024 is picking up on that theme, because it's going to be a very wet end to New Year's Day, with rain spreading in across much of England, Wales, Northern Ireland and eventually into Scotland for the second half of the night. That'll be pushing into colder air ahead of it, so it will be falling as snow over the higher ground here. Very windy for Shetland, with gales and also further coastal gales across southern areas of England overnight. Will be quite mild in the south, holding up in double-digit figures, but something colder for Scotland, with a patchy frost to kick off Tuesday morning. The rain here will slowly push its way northwards, lingering over the Northern Isles later on in the day. Parts of eastern, southern Scotland could see some brighter conditions for the bank holiday here, but a very wet Tuesday to come for much of England and Wales. Some uncertainty in regards to the exact track of this rain, but some localised disruption is possible through the day because of that rain, as well as the strong winds that will be persisting. Again, temperatures ranging between 7 and 13 degrees Celsius, but feeling a bit colder if you are exposed to the wind. On Wednesday, one area of low pressure is slowly drifting off towards the continent, but we've still got this one lingering to the northwest of the UK, and this trailing occluded front will continue to bring outbreaks of rain, particularly for the Northern Isles. Again, very windy with further gales here. Elsewhere, it's a mixture of sunshine and showers, those showers most frequent and heaviest in the west, pushing in on a very brisk westerly wind. The winds and the showers will slowly ease down as we head throughout the second half of the week, but it's also going to be turning colder. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 1 o'clock on Monday, the 1st of January. Skating on thin ice, NHS leaders warn that hospitals, GP surgeries and other services are in a highly vulnerable position. That's as junior doctors ready themselves for 144 consecutive hours of walkouts. Kemi for leader. Business set Kemi Badenoch is the favourite to become the next Tory party leader. That's according to a poll of grassroots Conservatives. Is she the woman for the job? And Britain's warning. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says that Britain is prepared to take direct action if attacks on commercial shipping by the Houthi rebels in Yemen continue. Right, and a question for you at home. Is veganism the way to lose weight this new year, or could it actually make you fatter? I ask because we're going to be debating that very question in a few later on in the show. Later on in the show, we'll have someone who is a meat eater versus, of course, a vegan to battle it out, because I think sometimes it's very, very carb heavy, isn't it? All of this pre-packaged food that's supposed to be fake meat. Could it actually make you fatter, or is it the way to be fit and healthy this year? We'll be debating that later in the show. But first, your headlines with Aaron.
It's a minute past 1. Very good afternoon to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Emergency services in Japan are responding to multiple fires and up to 30 collapsed buildings after a major earthquake. A 7.6 magnitude quake hit the Noto region in the centre of the country at approximately 7 a.m. UK time. No casualties have yet been reported, but a government spokesperson says it's understood people are trapped beneath the rubble.
As of today, at 6 p.m. local time, there have been numerous calls to the emergency services, and we have confirmed several incidents of collapsed homes following the earlier earthquake. We will continue to make all efforts to gather information in order to identify all injured persons. The specific details are currently unclear, but we have received reports of 6 individuals trapped by collapsed buildings in Ishikawa Prefecture. We do not have information on whether these injuries are related to the tsunami, but the details are currently being confirmed.
Evacuation orders remain in place for coastal areas, although a major tsunami warning has since been downgraded. 1 metre high waves are hitting the shoreline, with authorities warning they could reach 5 metres in height in the coming hours. Tens of thousands of people have been left without power, and an official from the country's meteorological agency says more earthquakes are expected. British forces are prepared to respond to cargo ship attacks by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says the UK won't hesitate to take direct action to protect the key shipping route. The Iran-backed Houthis have targeted and hijacked merchant ships, citing support for Hamas in its war with Israel. The US Navy recently said it sank 3 rebel boats that had been targeting a container ship in the region. The number of channel crossings in 2023 has fallen by more than a third compared with the previous year. The final crossings of the year took place on the 16th of December, when 55 people made the journey from France in one boat. Bad weather, though, have prevented any further attempts. The provisional annual total for the year is more than 29,000. New restrictions on visa routes come into force today as the government attempts to tackle net migration. Now, only foreign students on postgraduate or government-sponsored courses can bring their families over. The Home Secretary, James Cleverly, says the new ban will prevent people from manipulating the system, and it will reduce migration by tens of thousands. But critics say it will damage universities, which rely on foreign student fees, and could also harm the UK's international reputation. Average household energy bills will now be almost £100 more expensive. The energy regulator's increased its price cap by 5% in response to rising wholesale prices. Households are urged to submit meter readings today, if possible, to their supplier to ensure they aren't overcharged. Ofgem says suppliers must identify and help those who are struggling with their bills. Well, junior doctors are being urged to call off what will be the longest strike in NHS history. The NHS Confederation says the 6-day strike, which is planned to start on Wednesday, will put patients at serious risk. Health leaders say industrial action will leave hospitals, GP surgeries and other services skating on very thin ice in what's usually the busiest week of the NHS year. The planned strike will amount to 144 consecutive hours of industrial action, the longest in the 75-year history of the health service. Eye tests may be required for drivers over the age of 70. The Automobile Association's calling for mandatory screening after the number of licence-holding drivers over the age of 90 doubled in the last decade. A record 153,000 Britons in that age group held a full licence in November, with no requirements for additional qualification or screening. The AA wants drivers to be able to show evidence of regular eye tests once they reach 70 to improve road safety. Well, this is GB News. We're on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker too. Now, back to Emily.
Well, it's a happy new year for Kemi Badenoch because a poll by Conservative Home has suggested that she would be the favourite to succeed Rishi Sunak as Conservative leader. 38% of respondents named her, the Business Secretary, as their preferred minister. Penny Mordaunt and also Suella Braverman were the only other current MPs to get into double figures. They achieved 23% and 14% respectively. A solid effort. So here to break this down for us is GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, Kemi must be pleased.
Yeah, Kemi must be very pleased. A 38% turnout in that poll from Conservative Home is really pretty impressive for a sitting cabinet minister. Now, it's a small poll from Conservative Home. It's, I think, just over 870 people, but it's an important poll. These are Conservative members. They are the people who will be picking the next leader of the Conservative Party. And Kemi Badenoch is far and away above her nearest competitors, Suella Braverman and Penny Mordaunt. Why is Kemi so popular this year? Well, it seems as though she is beginning to do what many people thought was impossible and seems to be uniting the right and the left of the Conservative Party. We saw just how deep the splits between those two halves of the party ran at the end of the last parliamentary term when the Rwanda bill was going through Parliament, and we saw the right of the party push back against the bill. Many of them are threatening to vote the bill down or at least amend it in its third reading and report stage over the next couple of weeks. While on the left of the party, there was also discontent at the bill because they felt that it went too far, too close to breaking international law. Kemi Badenoch, however, has managed to sort of gain plaudits from both those sides. On the right, she's popular because she's spoken out boldly and some would say bravely against some of the trans ideology, if you like. She's been the driving force behind reversing that gender recognition legislation in Scotland, which would have enabled anyone to change their gender without a certificate. She's also spoken up against gender self-identification in schools. That's got lots of the right of the party on side. But on the other hand, as business secretary, she's been quite cautious about that idea to have a bonfire of Brexit legislation. We were expecting an idea from Boris Johnson for 4,000 different bits of EU law to go up in flames on the 31st of December this year. Kemi Badenoch has chosen to take a slower approach to Brexit. She's been speaking to business leaders and has heard their concerns about uncertainty to business if those laws were simply disposed of at the end of 2023. So on the whole, she's managed to get some recognition both from the right and the left of the party. That said, trying to reunite the Conservative Party after what everyone is assuming will be election defeat will be a very, very tough task indeed. And I mean, rather her than me in the job of Conservative leader after the next election.
Yes, now if Kemi were Health Secretary, would she be polling so well? I'm talking about junior strikes that are starting again on Wednesday amongst junior doctors, going on for 144 consecutive hours, 6 days. This is really, really not what the government needs and what the rest of us, the public, need.
Absolutely. It's a huge headache for the government and very, very worrying indeed for the public. This is set to be the longest junior doctor walkout in NHS history, and it comes at the busiest time for the NHS, literally the busiest week in the NHS's calendar. January is when we start to see the emergence of those seasonal illnesses. Flu is likely to dominate their headlines in the coming weeks. We normally face an NHS winter crisis. No reason why this year should be any different. And there are staff shortages anyway within the NHS because people are off ill with COVID. The NHS Confederation, led by Matthew Taylor, has released a very, very stark warning to the BMA. He's asked for the strike to be called off, or at the very least for the BMA to take notice of senior doctors if they request that junior doctors be called off strike and into work for an emergency. There is an agreement in place whereby junior doctors will be forced off the picket lines and into work if emergencies break out. But the very fact that Matthew Taylor, the chief of the NHS Confederation, is having to tell the BMA to take that agreement seriously shows just how bad the relationship has become between the chiefs in the NHS and those NHS unions. The other worry, of course, is that there is no end in sight to these strikes. The junior doctors are asking for a 35% pay rise, something that the government has repeated over and over again is simply impossible. So yes, 144 hours of strikes in the coming week, but many, many more in 2024.
Yes, a very worrying time for those in need of treatment and, of course, their families. Thank you very much indeed, Olivia Utley, GB News political correspondent, bringing us up to date. Now, in other news, Veganuary has been a worldwide sensation, don't you know, for the past few years. People take up eating like a vegan for the entirety of January, a bit like dry January, but with veganism. This was dedicated to changing public attitudes of veganism and also to encourage people to make the transition. But we're posing the question, is veganism really the healthiest option for 2024? We're now joined by animal rights activist Joey Carb Strong and the belly fat shaving expert himself, goodness me, former presenter of Fat Family's Steve Miller, belly fat shaving expert. What on earth?
Listen, I don't know where all these titles come from. They call me all sorts of things, but I guess we're talking about New Year's resolutions and that sort of stuff.
Yes, we are indeed. Well, Steve, I'm going to start with Joey because Joey is the vegan here. And Joey, how long have you been a vegan and why do you think it's the best way to live a healthy lifestyle?
Thank you. I've been vegan for 10 years. And just a first point to make is veganism as a philosophy is not actually about health. It's not a diet. It's not a weight loss program or something we do for ourselves. It's something that we actually do for the animal victims who are subjected to horrifying treatments so humans can commodify their bodies. It's basically about living a life that avoids violating the rights of animals, whether for food, clothing, or any other purpose. But it just so happens that according to the largest body of nutrition professionals in the world, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, a well-planned vegan diet can be healthy for all stages of the life cycle, including for athletes, pregnant women, and provides health benefits for the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. So the point is, if we can be happy and healthy without doing this to animals, doing horrifying things to animals, then why wouldn't we?
Joey, it might be true that a lot of vegans do it for animal rights reasons, but there are quite a lot of people who go vegan in order to lose weight, aren't there?
Well, the highest quality research does show that vegans tend to have a lower BMI, probably because of the water content and fiber content of plant-based foods. The studies show we have a lower mortality and lower rates of heart disease and cancer. I don't think you can't be vegan. Vegans for health or weight loss. Veganism is a philosophy that seeks to exclude exploitation of animals by the best way you can. But yes, you can eat plant foods and it can aid in weight loss. But I think it's beside the point. I mean, the things that are happening to animals is the main point. It's a horrifying...
Yeah, for you, it's a philosophy as much as it is a diet. Steve, should we all quit the meat in order to shed a few of those Christmas, New Year pounds? Is Steve there?
Stop. Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. First of all, can I say I think Joey's got a heart of gold and I think he speaks for the animals beautifully. I actually live with a vegetarian for the reasons that Joey explains. But I do like a bacon sarnie, especially when I've got a hangover like this morning. And it was literally, the butter was dripping off my bread and I put the brown sauce on as well. And we do know that meat, meat is protein. It helps you feel full and all of that sort of stuff. So when it comes to veganism, my vegan friends, I have to be honest, they look very healthy. They are very healthy. I should be disagreeing with Joey here, I guess. But actually, I think what he's saying makes actually a lot of sense. And when I go to the Yorkshire Dales and I'm walking and I see those little lambs, I tell you what, that created an aversion straight away. I will not eat lamb anymore. But
So,
I can't give
Steve, are you saying that the only reason you're not a vegan or a vegetarian is because you're a bit greedy?
Oh, I'm really greedy with my meat.
Well, there you go.
Listen. I like chicken, and I really like turkey, and I really like bacon. I love the texture. I love the taste. Chicken makes me feel full. So if I'm wanting to kind of trim up a little bit myself, I'll just get a wedge of chicken or ham or whatever, and I pack in that protein. It's very tasty.
Thanks, Steve. Joey, that's true, isn't it? Meat provides a huge amount of protein in one go.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree that meat contains a large amount of protein and protein can satiate you and help you lose weight. But there's a lot of plant foods that contain a large amount of protein too, higher protein plant foods like beans and legumes. And TVP is a wonderful soya meat replacement that's high in fiber and low in fat. I use it all the time. Been vegan for 10 years, trained, ran 100 Ks in one go. But I would, Steve sounds like a really nice, compassionate man, and it's actually a breath of fresh air to hear someone speak like this about animals. I'm not used to this. But I would encourage you, implore you to look at my YouTube channel and look at my gas chamber investigation. 88% of pigs are killed using CO2 gas in this country, free-range pigs as well, and they scream and suffer to death. And it's in the 90%, I think, a high 95% of chickens are factory farmed in this country, and they live a lives of abject suffering. And it doesn't seem consistent with the person that Steve is. Now, whether you like the taste or it's high in protein, then beside the point, you can make vegan food taste amazing. And I just don't think it justifies what we do to animals. It's just.
But Joey, there does seem to be a trend, because there used to be a lot of popular influencers who went on the veganism, actually turning back from it because they felt that they weren't getting enough nutrients. They felt maybe they didn't have enough energy. How can you replicate what we get from meat in, vegan food?
That's a very good question. I think a lot of those people are just looking for attention, airheads, or didn't plan their diet correctly. I mean, you can you can do that with a meat-based diet. A lot of people don't plan their meat-based diet correctly. I mean, really, veganism, you can be healthy. You can also, I'm not saying that you can't be healthy and include some animal products, but I'm an animal rights activist at the end of the day. And a lot of these ex-vegans, they're looking for the limelight. They didn't care about the animals to begin with, so they didn't really try. But the British Dietetics Association, the NHS, the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics, the best available research that we have on this topic show that if you plan your diet correctly and you take a vitamin D supplement in a cloudy country, you include a vitamin B12 supplement, which is very, very easy, you can live a healthy, happy life with less diseases as a vegan and not cause this horrible, horrible treatment of animals at the same time.
Steve, has Joey convinced you that not to put down the bacon sandwiches this year? New Year's resolution?
Listen, I've got to be honest. I'm going to speak as a fan because I'm a straight talker, and I think to a large degree, I want to say yes, he has, but I don't want to go back on it. And I live with a partner that has the same kind of morals and ethics and all of that sort of stuff. The problem I have is when I try things like this veggie bacon and veggie meat, it's not quite the same. But I tell you what would work. If I was to watch some of those YouTube videos before eating that Joey suggests, I think it would create an aversion for me against eating and being a greedy chops with a bacon butty or a chicken salad or whatever. So I think he raises a very good point. I'm very pro-animal, you see, and I do actually often feel guilty when I'm stuffing, I don't know, a piece of meat in my mouth.
Well, there you go, riddled with guilt, Steve, this new year. Thank you very much for your time, Steve Miller, and the animal rights activist Joey Carbstrong. Thank you very much for that debate there. I think Steve might be convinced to put down the bacon sandwich, but would you be? Would you go vegan? Not for me. I don't think. Not for me. I did try it once and it lasted a few days. And that was for health because it became a bit of a fad online. So I thought I'll have a go at that. But no, didn't turn out for me. But let me know if you're different. Now, in other news, Japan's tsunami warning has been downgraded to less serious after having earlier issued a major warning after a series of strong earthquakes. Now, buildings have collapsed. Tens of thousands of homes are without power. Locals are being advised to stay alert to any changes and follow instructions issued by authorities. We're joined now by volcanologist and expert on natural disasters, Dr. Carmen Solana. Carmen, thank you very much for joining me. Now, of course, we had this very high warning from the Japanese authorities that we could see this absolutely massive tsunami on the Japanese coast. It has now been downgraded, but we've seen a huge number of earthquakes. Could Japan still be at risk of very large waves, essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. It is not only the earthquakes and the shaking of the ground what is going to cause tsunami, but also remember that the area is very unstable and this is a coastal area, so you could have submarine tsunami as well, submarine landslides that cause tsunami. So all that west coast of Japan, where tsunamis are a bit less frequent than on the east one, they're now in high alert.
And Carmen, we know that Japan has a very sophisticated warning system. It clearly kicked into action very quickly today. It's one of the most seismically active areas in the world. Can you tell me a bit about how Japan has been able to have such a sophisticated warning system compared to other countries?
Well, of course, Japan and the United States are probably the most developed countries and rich countries prone to earthquakes, as we all probably will remember the 2011 earthquake and tsunami. This one has been very shallow, not as large, it's 7.5. But as you very well said, there are lots of aftershocks. Sometimes aftershocks are very large, substantial earthquakes on their own. And because of this large number of earthquakes and the money they invest in research, they have all sorts of sea buoys, for example, that are going to detect anything that happens. They have all the cameras, and they have seismometers, not only on land, but some of them are submarine. And the warning system, people are very well prepared. People really know what to do during this type of emergencies. They're told to go, and they have been told in this occasion as well, to go to high ground, to evacuate areas that could be vulnerable. All the mapping, they know very well which are the areas that, if there is a tsunami, will be affected. And people also train regularly. They learn it at schools as kids. They go they do all sorts of drills.
Yes, we heard that young children are drilled in from a very young age at school, and of course their parents as well, how to deal with earthquakes, how to deal with in the event of a tsunami. And of course we saw today how the authorities kicked in immediately, warning everyone on those coastal areas to evacuate as quickly as possible. They said, you know, every minute counts. So it seems like the people of Japan are very much, well, they know what to do, don't they? Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Carmen Solana, who is a volcanologist and an expert on natural disasters. Very good to have your time. Appreciate it. Now, the UK is ready to take direct action. That's what the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, has said in response to Houthi rebels targeting foreign ships in the Red Sea. Our reporter, Charlie Peters, will join us to explain all after this very short break.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 1:26 on New Year's Day. Now, the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, has issued a warning to the Houthi rebels in Yemen that Britain is prepared to take direct action if attacks on commercial shipping continue. Now, the warning comes after the US Navy destroyed 3 small boats attempting to board a container ship in the Red Sea over the weekend. So joining us now to discuss this escalating situation is our reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, tell me, what is the significance of Shapps' comments?
Well, the Defence Secretary warning this morning that Britain was prepared to take direct and indeed further action on the Houthi rebels who are operating out of Yemen. They're a Iran-backed group that have been engaging in a civil war with the internationally recognised government there and have shifted their capabilities towards targeting Israeli-flagged vessels, but also general commercial shipping passing through the Red Sea, particularly through the Strait of Hormuz in the south. Some 12% of global supplies passing through that narrow naval passage. So the significance of the Defence Secretary's comments is such that this is a very precarious situation, and Britain has been pushing on reducing its inflationary pressures. This is one of the key targets of Rishi Sunak's premiership. And if these attacks continue and commercial shipping continues to be intercepted by drone and missile attacks, as they have been for the last 3 months, then this could put that domestic agenda at risk. One of the keys now to Rishi Sunak's anti-inflationary measures is what happens when the Royal Navy and the US Navy operate in the Gulf. And so that is of significant concern to the government. Over 100 drone and missile attacks launched by the Houthis since the war on October the 7th between Israel and Hamas kicked off in the Gaza Strip. But there are many questions today about whether or not the Royal Navy and that US-led coalition has the capability and indeed the courage to really take on this issue. Because if they do engage with strikes on the Houthi positions inside Yemen, those missile launch sites, there is risk of a direct confrontation with Iran. And we do know that the many proxy groups that Iran enjoys throughout the region on the so-called Shia Crescent, from Tehran through Iraq and Syria to Beirut in Lebanon, have been posturing, sometimes indirectly, but often directly, against Israel since that conflict erupted. And so by targeting those missile launch sites directly with US and British missiles, that could escalate the confrontation and risk bringing more actors and more regional strife into play. But at the same time, many people this morning and security analysts that we've spoken to at GB News saying that they can't allow this situation to continue. Some $34 billion of goods were diverted 5,000 miles away from the Red Sea route before Christmas, and 12 major international shipping companies continue to take that African detour due to the perceived risk to shipping. So it is a very precarious situation for Britain and Grant Shapps today, but many people saying that this situation cannot continue while also balancing it delicately against the heightened risk from Iran.
And Charlie, how have Iran responded?
Well, so far there has definitely been an increase in the Houthi efforts since their first attack on October the 26th, which was intercepted by a US destroyer in the Red Sea. That escalation started with just drone attacks launched towards Israel and then continued to Israeli-flagged ships and further onto any ship going to or from Israeli ports. We've also seen them taking on commercial shipping more directly. We heard in the intro, of course, that 3 small boats were destroyed by the US Navy on Sunday after they attempted to board a Danish-flagged commercial ship in the Red Sea. So it is understood by the security industry, in particular those in the maritime security industry, that Iran has been heightening its supplies towards the Houthi rebels. And they're no ragtag militia. This is a group that has fought successfully a civil war against the internationally recognized government in Yemen, beating off hundreds of billions of dollars of Saudi arms in that fight. There's currently a frosty ceasefire between those two sides. But if this conflict escalates, that also could erupt.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much, Charlie Peters, our GB News reporter. Now, still to come, driving licences held by people aged 90 or above have doubled in 10 years. Now, that's sparked a call for mandatory eye tests to boost road safety. What do you make to that? I'll be speaking about that and much more with my panel after your headlines.
Hi there, it is 1:32. Aaron Armstrong here with your headlines in the GB newsroom. Homes have collapsed in Japan, with residents evacuated amid tsunami warnings after a major earthquake hit the country. A 7.6 magnitude quake hit the Noto region in the centre of Japan at approximately 7 a.m. UK time. No casualties have yet been reported, but a government spokesperson says it's understood people are trapped under the rubble.
As of today, at 6 p.m. local time, there have been numerous calls to the emergency services, and we have confirmed several incidents of collapsed homes following the earlier earthquake. We will continue to make all efforts to gather information in order to identify all injured persons. The specific details are currently unclear, but we have received reports of 6 individuals trapped by collapsed buildings in Ishikawa Prefecture. We do not have information on whether these injuries are related to the tsunami, but the details are currently being confirmed.
Evacuation orders remain in place for coastal areas, although a major tsunami warning has since been downgraded, easing fears of waves up to 5 metres in height. Tens of thousands of people, though, have been left without power, and smaller tsunami waves have already hit the coastline. Alerts remain in place in North and South Korea as well. Japan's meteorological agency says further earthquakes are expected. The number of channel crossings in 2023 has fallen by more than a third compared with the previous year. 55 people made the journey from France in one boat on the 16th of December in what was the final crossing of the year. Bad weather conditions have prevented any further attempts. The provisional annual total for the year is more than 29,000. And the one and only pop legend Chesney Hawkes can be heard echoing through the capital today as thousands of people have been lining the streets to watch the New Year's Day parade, the 2-mile carnival through central London from Green Park to the Palace of Westminster. Started in 1987. Dancers and live music from around the world will be performing, as well as the 20-foot-high balloon police officer will be keeping an eye along the route. You can get more on those stories or any other ones we've covered today on our website, gbnews.com.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country.
only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back, it's 1:38. Before the break, we were debating veganism, whether it is healthier, whether it could lead you to shedding the pounds. Now, Chris written in, he said, can you please debate veganism honestly and truthfully? It's nothing to do with processed, packaged fake meat. As a vegan and someone who hasn't eaten rotting corpses since 1973, I cook spaghetti bolognese, curry, chili, shepherd's pie, Mexican fajitas, all using vegan foods. Well, there you go, good for you. Julie says, I've been vegetarian for over 50 years. Lived my life in the country, I eat dairy-free range, but I don't believe in forcing my views on others. And Christine says, tried it for 6 months, went straight back to the meat. Plant-based food just doesn't taste the same. Well, there you go. Divided the inbox, gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, how old is too old to be in the driving seat? There have been numerous calls for mandatory eye tests as the number of drivers aged 90 plus has doubled in the last decade. So let's put that question to my panel, former Labour MP Stephen Pound and Conservative commentator Benedict Spence. Now, perhaps you're too young, both of you, to comment
Only just in my
on
case.
this. But are you alarmed by the number of 90-year-olds plus who are driving?
I tell you what alarms me is the fact that if you actually predicated driving licences on age, anybody under the age of 25 probably wouldn't have a licence because the majority of accidents are caused by people of your age. Whereas people of my age, we pootle along in the middle lane. We know it's the middle
sadly,
lane.
I'm not under 25.
OK,
but,
well, you know,
thank you for
in the
saying
zone.
that.
But, you know, but we're the Middle Lane Residents Association. We just sort of pootle along quietly, just minding our own business. And I think we're some of the safest drivers. But what this really is all about, Emily, is just that there are more 90-year-olds now. Simple as that.
Oh, yeah, 150,000 is now the number of drivers aged 90. Is that cause for concern?
Yes, it's a terrifying thing that people are living so long, really. You know, we ought to be doing something
No
about this.
driving.
We ought to be doing something by letting them drive.
Unfortunately,
Hancock tried.
The eyesight does begin to wane.
It does. I mean, I think that this is... Look, nobody wants the state sort of rushing in and saying, do this, don't do that. But ultimately, it is about safety. It's not just... You know, I joke about it being a good way of thinning the population, letting the over 90s drive, but it's not just about them. There are other people on the roads, as you've just alluded to. Some of them are also under 25. And when when you have a lot of congestion and you have people who can't necessarily see very well, the reaction time slows, it's not safe for everybody. So actually, I think that this is one of those things where it's a common sense thing.
Yeah.
Actually, it's their safety and our safety.
Stephen, driving is a freedom, and as you get older, it's the last thing you want to let go of. Particularly, you don't want to be relying on public transport. You don't want to be relying on family and relatives. You don't want to be relying on anyone else. You want to be in your car.
Speaking on behalf of the geriatric community, may I say that we rather enjoy riding on buses and sitting...
You're looking well for 90.
and say, hello, can we have a chat? Well, look, I mean, there are more and more people, and I don't think that's the great freedom that's necessary. I think the key point here is that you do automatically have your driving test checked anyway. So the thing is, my driving licence ran out when I was 70-something or other, and I have to then go and get an eye test before I can get a new one. So it's all sorted out. It's all fair and it's all... But, I mean, Benedict, not for the first time, makes a good point. It's all very well somebody...
Not for the first time.
Twice in one day. One year.
Maybe this is it. No, I mean, you know, you do hear about 90-year-old people driving the wrong way down the M1 or driving into people's living rooms without knocking on the door because they're driving in their car. And there are problems like that. So, the system works. And I have to say...
The last thing we want to do is patronise people.
Absolutely.
That is the last thing we want to do.
I think the last thing we want is for them to drive the wrong way up the motorway. But yes, the second last thing. Very good points in one show.
That probably is more important. Shall we move on? Because I like to squeeze in lots of the smaller stories in this part of the show. Now, I want to move on to the... They're just giggling away. The Archbishop of Canterbury. He has urged politicians not to treat their opponents as enemies, but fellow human beings. Stephen.
Dream on, baby. Look, I tell you, every single Wednesday morning in the 22 years I was in the House of Commons, every single time we'd meet before Qs, before Prime Minister's questions, and the whips would say, no, we want more noise, more violence, we want to get in there. And yet, as soon as we appeared on television, no, we've got to be more respectful to our opponents. I mean, it's one of those things that everybody would like to do, but nobody actually does. But I think the problem with Sir Welby, sort of recently knighted, recently ennobled, is that he has form for, unfortunately, interfering in things he doesn't know a great deal about. And because in the Church of England, I can't imagine that they have these dreadful knockdown, drag-out fights. Actually, come to think of it, they do. So, maybe he should be looking at his own opponents within the Church.
Is it Justin Welby's place to be telling our politicians how to behave?
He's a spiritual leader. He can say what he likes. I think... Ultimately, though, this actually reflects a problem in the Church of England, which is that there is a tendency from some members of the clergy to just urge people to be nice, and that if any sort of voices are raised or you touch on any sort of difficult subjects, that's not being nice, and oh, no, we can't have that. And I think that I understand where this comes from. I think a lot of political rhetoric has been sort of dragged down slightly in the last few years, but ultimately that's because the system, the politicians in general, haven't been working quite as they are. I think Justin Welby would do a lot better to be sort of championing solid policy ideas rather than saying, well, let's all be nice to each other. That ultimately has been driving a lot of public policy for a long time in this country.
Yes.
This policy because we need to be nice to people. This policy because we need to be nice to people. How are things going? Well, we're all poorer.
From Justin Welby, we want a 3-point plan on how to stop the boats that doesn't involve Rwanda deportation schemes.
Yes.
We need a house building plan too, and perhaps a policy plan to fix the NHS.
Well, there goes Lambeth Palace. But I mean Sadiq Khan used to talk about kumbaya politics, because the idea of sort of Kev the Rev and the guitar Vic. I'm sorry that we need to have a bit more solid. As far as I'm concerned, Justin Welby is a politician. He sits in the House of Lords. He has the same power as anybody else to make laws. So he should actually realise that this is the rage of Caliban at seeing his own face in the mirror.
Yeah.
He is a politician.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Catholics sitting on the sofa, we're delighted that the Archbishop of Canterbury has taken a step back from the previous rhetoric of some of the incumbents of the seat, but it is a bit
they haven't burned us for a couple of hundred years.
We're doing so well, aren't we? Oh, my word, we're accepted in society.
We dodged the bullet.
I love it.
It's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? Because I think we'd all like it if people agreed more got on better and managed to be constructive in their conversations, but it's not very realistic, is it, when we're so divided on absolutely everything?
Have you read Ian Dale's book, Why Can't We Just Be Nice to Each Other?
I haven't yet.
And I got to the second page and I thought, well,
no. Really across the room. Called him up and said, no, I can't.
Is this like James O'Brien's book, How to Be Right?
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Well, at least we agree on that. Just not even a response, just a, oh, boy.
Right, OK, well, we agree on that. Let's move on, then. Now, a farmer has apparently revealed a new way to get rid of your Christmas tree. Lots of people will be wanting to get rid of their Christmas decorations today to start the new year afresh. Apparently, you should feed your Christmas tree to an alpaca. What's this about?
This is fabulous story. This is I mean, I don't know how she found out that alpacas like chewing on Christmas trees, but I mean, maybe they sort of leapt out of the fields and got stuck into some Christmas trees. But this is absolutely wonderful. If this is the answer, then we can recycle all those Christmas trees into prime alpaca manure and get it down my allotment, and it'll be absolutely wonderful.
I mean, it's a better solution than Hunter S. Thompson's, which was to douse his in kerosene and shove it in his grate and set fire to it, which, you know, he did once and then was not able to do again. But, you know, alpacas are exciting animals. People like to go and stroke them. They make very good wool. I'm actually sitting here with something with alpaca blend. It's good for the environment. It's, you know, broadly speaking, I'm not opposed to this. I've often wondered what is the environmental impact on growing all of these trees for a year or two, chopping them down and then just dumping them by the side of the road. It seems to happen.
Well, in Ealing, I have to say, you know, we are the trailblazers when it comes to recycling Christmas trees. We chop them up and then use it as on the allotments to make the parts. But what's the difference in an alpaca and a llama? Because Matthew Parris is always going on about his pet llamas. So if alpacas and llamas are the same thing and they both like eating Christmas trees, there's the solution.
Which one is Peruvian?
Probably the llamas.
That's the llama. So the alpaca is not from Peru, and sometimes I don't know.
Well, GBNews at GBnews.com if you know the difference between a llama and an alpaca, because we don't seem to.
I've really dropped the ball there.
It's quite a sad sight, isn't it, when you're on a residential road and there's just a whole road full of dead trees.
Emily, what really depresses me is, you know, I'm a traditional 12th night. You keep your Christmas trees up, keep your Christmas tree. Yesterday, I actually saw Christmas trees dumped by the side of the road in Ealing, and that's depressing.
No tradition.
Two levels.
Yeah, it is rather.
But they do burn beautifully, though.
as Hunter could attest to.
Have you taken yours down yet, either of you?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. When are you supposed to keep it up until?
12th night.
The 12th night, which is not yet. Is that the...
Wonderful Catholic education.
I know it's the 12th night, but I don't know what date that is, unfortunately.
I mean, that's
January the 8th.
Yeah.
January the 8th. OK, we've got to keep it up till January the 8th. I know some people take it down the day after Christmas. You know, done with that, out with the old.
They also put them up sometimes in November, which is equally bizarre to me. I mean, when did Rishi Sunak put his up? 1st of December or something like that.
I think he put it up as soon as a camera appeared.
Yeah.
Right, well, before we discuss New Year's resolutions, let's go back to some live pictures from central London where New Year's Day celebrations are taking place. There you go, a band playing there.
Well, it's the Lord Mayor's Parade.
The Lord Mayor's Parade through central London, through the streets. We also saw some cheerleaders dancing around in leotards, lots of music, lots of festivities.
Are those going to have
activities.
Paid for and sponsored by
That looks like Whitehall. That looks like Whitehall going through. I've never joined in with this.
You've never marched in one of these?
No, I've never marched in one of these. Have you, Stephen?
You've never been the mayor of a London borough?
No, sadly not.
I mean, every mayor, when I was mayor of Ealing, and all the other mayors, we get invited to the New Year's Day parade, and we have to turn up, you know, with the chain gang, they used to call us, because we had all our...
The chain gang?
Well, the royal flush. But come along. But I have to say, what was interesting, Benedict, not for the first time, but possibly the third time today, has made an interesting point.
Here we go.
One of the things that really boiled my blood last night was all that sponsorship by the Mayor of London stuff across the sky.
Yeah.
So I bet there's some people on the back, sponsored by the Mayor of London. Look at those green jackets marching down there. What's on the back of their uniform?
I was going to say they should have them like football kits, have them sort of splashed across the front.
Yes, the Mayor of London, the fireworks. So they annoyed you a little bit. Well, that Mayor of London presents, was it?
Exactly.
He didn't use his name, Sadiq Khan. He didn't say Sadiq Khan presents, but he probably wanted to.
Well, no, but it was also...
They had to wrestle him back.
to wrestle him back from that.
Yeah.
Well, there's also that message underneath about diversity in London, you know, for heaven's sake.
Oh, I think that's almost legally mandated now. You have to have a little stamp that says diversity, equity, inclusion. It goes on absolutely everything.
Thank you, Sadiq.
Right, well, enough of Sadiq Khan. What's your New Year's resolution?
Eh? Oh, I remember, was it Alan Johnson? He said he thought that Roger Moore was a New Year's resolution, not an actor.
Stephen, what's your New Year's resolution? You haven't got one, clearly. You haven't got
to make
one.
more of those kind of jokes on television as the New Year's resolution.
Less hangovers, more movement.
Yeah, I'm not going to... I don't know if you're going to do dry January, I'm not, but I've got 2 grandchildren who were born in the last couple of months, and my New Year's resolution is to be... Well, it's very little to do with me, but...
Yeah, but it's nice for you, isn't it?
No, what I want to do is actually be a good grandfather, and by doing so, actually be a good citizen. I want to be a better person, because heaven knows I've not been in the past.
That's very self-aware of you. And Benedict, what about you?
I can't say something wholesome. Mine is to be on time more, not to sort of keep producers at television studios on edge by sort of turning up quite late, which is something that I may not have done today.
I think you turned up about 1 minute before go time.
Oh, it was 3 minutes.
3 minutes before go
I was counting.
time.
I was nervous, but no, it was all fine. But yes, turn up on time for things, not get off-commed. These are just a few of my New Year's resolutions.
Not get off-commed. Well, there's a New Year's resolution for the broadcasters among us. Thank you very much.
Can I just say hello to Lottie and Arlo, my 2 new grandchildren. Lottie and Arlo, you'll be watching because you are the future, and this station is the future of broadcasting.
So smooth.
That's very sweet, actually, Stephen.
They're
You've been
lovely
a fantastic contributor all year.
Yeah.
Well, the past year. And today. all year.
For the 12 hours.
Well, I think we've actually got a little bit of time left, don't we? Or are we going to the darts? We're going to the darts. Excellent. Theo Giacomba is at the darts in Ali Pali, Alexandra Palace in North London. Is he there, Theo? No, he may be. Ah, excellent. Theo, so tell me, Luke Littler for the win.
Yes, that's what more than 3,000 fans are hoping for. His match should be starting in the next, we hope in the next half an hour or so. There's currently a match taking place at the moment, but the teenage sensation has been making the airwaves in the last couple of weeks, particularly as a 16-year-old. Everyone we've spoken to today say, when I was 16, I wasn't doing this. He's coming up against some of the biggest names when it comes to darts. Now, of course, if he wins today, he'll be in the semi-final, and today he's taking on Brendan Dolan from Northern Ireland. And before today, he beat Raymond van Barneveld, who's the 5-time world champion. Now, for anyone who watches darts, that is a big name. So if he's beaten him and he's playing Brendan today, and if he goes into the next round, certainly it's something, big achievement that he's been able to do. But this hasn't happened overnight. He's spoken about his story, having got into darts from a very young age. He's saying he first had interaction or interest in darts just from the age of 18 months, and then around 5 or 6 years old, he was saying, his dad was saying, let's put football aside, take on darts seriously. And since then, well, we see him today taking on some of those big names, and lots of people who love darts are all here celebrating and hoping that he's going to be going into that next round. But most interestingly though, today we've seen lots of people in fancy dress costumes. We've seen people dressed as priests, dartboards, fancy dress costumes from all different aspects of life. So very, very interesting today. We've been able to see some of those pictures, but fingers crossed that they're hoping he can take on that game today and go into the next round.
Thank you very much, Theo Giacomba there outside Ali Pali for the World Championships in darts. Well, there you go. His parents fostered his talent from a very, very, very young age.
Well, he reckoned his brother was a better player than he was, but somebody was at the fancy dressing dressed as Kevin Keegan, I think. That's a bit retro, isn't it?
Is it Kevin Keegan?
Yeah, with the chap with the scouse wig. And
what would you dress up as?
Is it a distinguished... I don't know, what would I dress up as?
For my last
punch, usually.
For my last day of school, we were all supposed to dress up as something silly for our school photograph, and I did dress up as Kevin Keegan. As a
you two are very aligned.
Gonna say, that photo will never see the light of day, but
it's
it does
time
exist.
to say thank you and goodbye to you both, former Labour MP Stephen Brown and the Conservative commentator Benedict Spence. You've been fabulous.
The rough and the
Thank you for taking us through all those, you know, very miscellaneous stories we had there on all sorts. Thank you very much for your time. That is all from me, but coming up, it's New Year's Day with Michael Portillo. What could be better?
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, Happy New Year. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. The last few months of 2023 were rather wet, and the start of 2024 is picking up on that theme because it's going to be a very wet end to New Year's Day, with rain spreading in across much of England, Wales, Northern Ireland and eventually into Scotland for the second half of the night. I'll be pushing into colder air ahead of it, so it will be falling as snow over the higher ground here. Very windy for Shetland with gales and also further coastal gales across southern areas of England overnight. Will be quite mild in the south, holding up in double-digit figures, but something colder for Scotland with a patchy frost to kick off Tuesday morning. The rain here will slowly push its way northwards, lingering over the northern Isles later on in the day. Parts of eastern, southern Scotland could see some brighter conditions for the bank holiday here, but a very wet Tuesday to come for much of England and Wales. Some uncertainty in regards to the exact track of this rain, but some localised disruption is possible through the day because of that rain, as well as the strong winds that will be persisting. Again, temperatures ranging between 7 and 13 degrees Celsius, but feeling a bit colder if you are exposed to the wind. On Wednesday, one area of low pressure is slowly drifting off towards the continent, but we've still got this one lingering to the northwest of the UK, and this trailing occluded front will continue to bring outbreaks of rain, particularly for the Northern Isles. Again, very windy with further gales here. Elsewhere, it's a mixture of sunshine and showers, those showers most frequent and heaviest in the west, pushing in on a very brisk westerly wind. The winds and the showers will slowly ease down as we head throughout the second half of the week, but it's also going to be turning colder. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
(2024), a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year. Throughout 2023, it was my pleasure to interview scores of people on everything from food and drink to history, literature and politics. Just before Christmas, I had the special privilege to meet and interview the actress and dancer Leslie Caron. Leslie, who grew up in wartime Paris, was just 17 when, performing in the French capital, she came to the attention of the established Hollywood star Gene Kelly. She went on to have a glittering career at the very height of Hollywood's golden age.